This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Welcome to the broadcast, everyone, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series we put together dealing with the current case that we're involved in. I'm sure you've heard about it, seen it, and that is the IRS attack on Christian and conservative organizations. And we're talking to a lot of experts, not only in the political realm, but also in the business realm. And our first guest that you're going to hear from in just a moment knows both ends of it, the business end and the political end. It's Herman Cain. He, of course, is a successful businessman, ran for president of the United States, developed the famous 999 plan to reform and eliminate the IRS as we know it. Take a listen to Herman Cain. Herman, let me ask you this. You are someone firsthand who experienced the Tea Party movement. You were a huge and have been a huge success in front of the Tea Party. When you were running for president, you were one of the most popular candidates among the Tea Party groups. And at that very same time you were running, we now find out that the IRS was targeting these Tea Party organizations. Give me your reaction when you first heard about this and kind of an overview of how you view the Tea Party movement right now.
Let's start with the Tea Party movement, which I thought was something that America needed. I recall speaking at one of the very first Tea Parties in Las Vegas on April 15th of the year before when they really first got started. The reason that I was enthusiastic about the Tea Party is because the people, the voters, were finally mobilizing in order to hold Washington accountable. That's what the Tea Party is all about. That's it. All of this other garbage that the media puts out there about the Tea Parties being far right wing extremists and all of that, that's just a way of the establishment media especially to try to discourage and intimidate. Secondly, when I heard that the IRS was targeting the Tea Party groups and other conservative groups, I was appalled. I have always experienced the IRS as an organization that was capable of abuse and an organization that liked to flex its muscles, but never did I expect for it to be so blatant as when they came after Tea Party and other conservative groups. So like you and many others, I was flabbergasted and also outraged over the fact that an agency that is supposed to be working for the people was really working against the people.
You know, it's interesting because you were one of the first really of the candidates when the election was taking place that came out aggressively on the need for tax reform. You had the famous 999 tax plan, which I suspect now, in light of the IRS situation, that if in fact the election were held today, it'd be getting even more attention than it got then. Tell me, you experienced, this was all going on while you're running for president. I mean, they're doing this targeting as you're running for president, and you're the leader, basically, within the political movement of the Tea Party groups. They certainly were looking at you as a major factor here. So you had this 999 plan. Let's talk about that, because I think right now, and I'd like your opinion on this, tax reform is a significant issue for the American people right now.
I take it to another level, Jay. Tax replacement. Have you noticed that in the narrative part of the politicians, they won't use the word replace? You don't have that in the public narrative anywhere. And so that's why I, along with my senior economic advisor, created 999. Number one, because we needed to change the narrative to replace. We needed to bring a focus on the biggest fiscal issue that we had, which was economic growth, the lack thereof. And starting with replacing the tax code was going to do it. The other reason that we developed 999 is because having worked with tax replacement systems like the flat tax and the fair tax for over 15 years, I knew that we needed to have something that would bring the flat tax people to the same table with the fair tax people. That's how we came up with the 999, because as you know, the first 9 is the corporate flat tax with a minor deduction. Second 9 is the personal flat tax. And then the third 9 is a national sales tax. Replacing the tax code is the narrative that I and others in my organization want to create over the next several months to get to the point where we can demand that Congress do something about
So
it.
when you talk about, Herman, a tax replacement, and you're one of the few leaders that are talking about a tax replacement, a lot of people are talking about tax reform, but you're talking
Yes.
about tax replacement. Does that
Yes.
mean we scrap the Internal Revenue Code as we know it?
Yes, we scrapped the Internal Revenue Code as we know it. It's 100 years old. And for 100 years, we have been lied to about reform.
Herman Cain is correct that there is significant reform necessary to the IRS. I actually believe we need to stop the agency as we know it. In other words, I think we need to eliminate the IRS as the entity that it is right now and reform it into a much different institution. I don't think it can self-correct. If you want to join me in this fight, and hundreds of thousands of you have, you go to ACLJ.org and you can sign a petition there, or you can do so at 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. By the way, we're in a matching challenge campaign right now, which means any amount you donate to the ACLJ, we get a matching gift for. So we'd appreciate your help there as well. If you want to sign that petition, ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. More with Herman Cain when we come back.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme. An out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Herman Cain had a bold initiative out to reform the IRS as we know it. As I said, it was called the 999 plan. We talked by Skype. Here's what he had to say.
So you're talking about replace the tax code, abolish
Yes.
the IRS, and
Yes.
get rid of the barriers that are stopping the growth of business. But we're in a
Yes.
political reality here of a difficult situation for those kind of
Yes.
policies I share as well. But we've got to, the politics, you've been in politics, we've got a very tough political environment here. How do you trudge through in this kind of political process? How do you get through to get some progress when you've got Washington just an absolute gridlock?
The way we get through is we stop asking Washington to solve these problems and we start demanding that they solve these problems by creating a massive grassroots initiative around these. This is why I'm a big supporter of the Tea Party. We have some candidates that got to Washington, D.C. in the last election because of support from Tea Party people, grassroots people. So when we develop the national narrative and the people control that narrative, like replace the tax code, energy independence, and restructure Social Security, guess what? It's like creating a parade if you got enough of the people and the voters, the people on Main Street saying, we demand this. The politicians will get out in front of the parade in order to get reelected. Rather than we send them to Washington, D.C., and they forget what they promised us, and they do what they need to do to exchange for political favors while they are there. No, let's create the people's parade demanding these solutions, and politicians will be falling all over each other trying to get out in front of this massive parade.
So it's fair to say that Herman Cain still has hope for this country, this great country, and you have faith in the American people.
I do. I still have this undying optimism that the American people can, in fact, take this nation back, is because I don't believe in giving up.
Herman Cain, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it more than you know.
It is my pleasure, my friend Jay. Thank you. Happy to do it.
Thanks.
You know, in the first episode of this three-part series, we brought you the case involving Rob Schenck and Faith in Action, that ministry. We're not going to hear from a business leader, a gentleman who's run major corporations, publicly held corporations. He's also a concerned citizen, a patriot, and is worried about the future of our country and the direction it's going, especially with an agency like the IRS completely out of control. Hear from Joe Gregory. So, Joe, let me ask you this. When you've been involved in a lot of businesses, companies that have been traded publicly on the New York Stock Exchange, you've been involved in political involvement. When you first got word of the IRS scandal, what was your reaction, this targeting of conservative groups?
Well, shocked, surprised, disappointed, upset, mad.
Why, when you say upset, I mean, my reaction was illegal, unconstitutional, and inappropriate, which is a lawyer's answer. But as a businessman and as a conservative, someone who's been involved in conservative politics and policy, what was the shocking aspect of it? Was it the blatancy of it?
Well, I guess I have to go back and preface this just by saying, as an American, I love this country. And so I also like the freedom to support those organizations that defend and advocate for those principles that the country was founded upon, and that we enjoy today. That's why I enjoy supporting the American Center for Law and Justice. That's why I enjoy supporting a lot of other nonprofit organizations, and because they defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because they defend the First Amendment and our freedom of speech and our freedom of religion and our freedom to congregate, or freedom of the press, or our freedom to petition the government for a redress of our grievances. For all those reasons, I support and enjoy the freedom to support those conservative organizations. And when I heard that the IRS was targeting groups that had their name, a patriot by their name, or Tea Party by their name, or
Liberty even,
or Liberty by their name, I mean, it really upset me. It was shocking, it's disappointing, but it was very upsetting as well to think that this administration and our federal government had an agency that was actually targeting people that they considered under the names of liberty and patriot as something that they felt they needed to slow down their process, target them, and act in a manner that I don't believe was very American.
The idea that I wanted you to look at this through the lens of a donor, because you are a donor to many organizations, that the IRS was asking about you, was asking groups like us about our donors and wanting information about our donors. How did that make you feel?
Well, it gave me pause.
Yeah.
And, I'm the kind of guy, me, Jay,
Yep.
that I've got a backbone, and
Yep.
That's the kind of thing that's going to make me even more determined to support those organizations that I believe in. But there are many people that didn't feel that way, and I believe that the agency did a good job of scaring away a lot of donors, scaring away a lot of people who would volunteer for those organizations because they felt like they didn't want to withstand that kind of scrutiny from the government. So it was a terrible travesty. And I'm glad to see that you are doing something about it.
Well, the lawsuit's just started. We just found out this afternoon, as we're filming this, just released, that in the testimony today and before one of the House Oversight Committees, that an IRS agent, this was done in private, just with the committee members, information's now coming out, said that the targeting right now today is still going on. As you and I are sitting here talking, the targeting is going on. In fact, that the applications that we've been arguing about in court now for over a month have been pending for 3 years, that the IRS still has those targeted for additional review. So it's as if they feel like they're immune from the legal system.
It just shows you that something is out of control here, that we need to, as citizens, regain control.
Are you worried? You got kids.
I'm worried for their future, yes, but I'm encouraged by organizations like yours and others that have decided that they're just not going to lay down and accept what's going on. And like you, I'm committed to fight. We have no other country to sail to, and this one is dear to me. It's existed through a lot of blood and treasure. A lot of people have sacrificed for our freedoms. And so we need to stand up and defend our freedoms. And I appreciate what the ACLJ is doing in that regard.
You know, as Joe said, we've got to be optimistic. We need to have hope. We need to believe that we can reform this situation. And I believe that we can do just that. But what we need to do is have you help us. And you can do that by signing this petition to remove the IRS, eliminate the IRS, abolish the IRS as we know it. You can do so by contacting us at ACLJ.org. That's ACLJ.org. Or 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org. Or 877-989-2255. Back with more, including the trailer from our movie Tax Invasion, when we come back.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme, an out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
What you're seeing today are actually almost outtakes from our movie. These are segments and scenes that are not in the actual movie Tax Invasion. We've got an in-depth report in this movie, and you need to see it. It's available for free. I think right now we're over 70,000 people have viewed this in just a few weeks. It's a free digital download. You just go to irsmovie.com. Here's the trailer.
Every year, Americans spend about $500 billion on tax compliance.
Yep.
As we like to say in Texas, that doesn't produce a single truck or tortilla. It's just wasted.
Are we going to have a nation that's for of and by the people, or a nation that is totally controlled by the government?
If men were angels, there'd be no need of masters. We don't have angels running these bureaucracies.
Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, they're horrified at this because no one wants to think, you know what, I supported one candidate, the other guy won, and now I'm going to be audited or punished or have my business closed down.
I was in our building and the knock came on the door. And the first thing I saw was a badge, IRS. Sir, I need to speak with you.
An agency that's supposed to be working for the people was really working against the people.
There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
The very foundation of our government was the idea that we could criticize the government when we disagree. That's what First Amendment free speech is all about. The Founding Fathers had a very different vision than what the Internal Revenue Service has.
Attempts to turn this into a scandal have failed.
As you can see from that movie trailer, our IRS movie Tax Invasion really covers this issue in depth. As I said, what you're seeing today is not in that movie. These were the cuts that did not go in the movie. One of the people I had a chance to speak with in Washington, D.C. was my friend Senator Ted Cruz. He's called for abolishing the IRS and proposing a flat tax. Here's the reasons why. Senator, let's focus. I'd like to focus on this IRS matter because it's something you've been very outspoken about, and it's something that I'm litigating. So we're in the middle of this. First of all, your reaction when you first got word. The president said he was outraged. Of course, now he's calling it a phony scandal. But what was your reaction when you first heard about the IRS targeting, which they acknowledged?
It is a gross abuse of power. When Richard Nixon tried to use the IRS to target his political enemies, it was wrong, and it was rightfully decried in a bipartisan manner. And when the Obama administration did the same thing, it's every bit as wrong. And at the time, the president loudly went out and denounced it.
Right.
And then a few months go by and he says it's a phony scandal, move on. We need to get to the bottom of these facts. What we know already is deeply troubling. And the administration's efforts to cover them up are even more troubling.
Well, the worst thing I think that we've seen in the last couple of days on this, and I'm litigating the case, I got 41 plaintiffs here, is you have now the FEC sending emails to Lois Lerner, Lois Lerner responding to these emails, sharing taxpayer information. That's a criminal act. Now, it was the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, said, we're going to have an FBI investigation here. This is criminal. You prosecuted a lot of cases. You've done a lot of cases. So the Attorney General says it, and then you've got the White House saying, but this is all a phony scandal, while we've got the FBI investigating the IRS.
Look, we have two career officials at the IRS who have pleaded the Fifth.
Yep.
Pleading the Fifth means if they testify truthfully, they may incriminate themselves for having committed a crime. And President Obama says this is a phony scandal. We've got two who have, and the media, as docile lambs, say, well, they pleaded the Fifth. We can't draw any inferences from that.
Right, no conclusions.
Now look, as you know well in law,
Right.
It is true in a criminal case that a jury is not allowed to draw an inference from pleading the Fifth. But in a civil case,
My case is a civil case, right?
a judge will instruct the jury, you may draw a negative inference from this witness
Right.
pleading the Fifth. You may take it as an implication that they got something to hide.
You've got the IRS chief counsel appointed by the president. Jack Lew is told, the Secretary of Treasury is told by the president, you investigate this, you don't leave any stone unturned, you find out who's responsible. Jack Lew's on TV, Chris Wallace, is asked the question by Chris Wallace, have you talked to the IRS chief counsel, what did he know and when did he know it? No, I haven't spoken to him, I'm not going to, that's not my job. Now the president just instructed him.
Right.
And we've got Carter Hull, a 48-year career IRS lawyer, pointing everything to Washington, pointing it right to the chief counsel's office. So what should happen next?
Well, Jay, if you look at Jack Lew's performance when he went on the Sunday shows, it was eerily reminiscent of Ambassador Susan Rice's performance
Absolutely.
after Benghazi.
Yep.
He was reading White House talking points.
Yep.
And just like Benghazi, we now know those talking points were false.
Yep.
They were knowingly false, and they were edited by the White House, and the White House was caught lying about their editing the talking points. Just so with the IRS, Jack Lew was sent out there to tell a story.
Right, a
And
script.
when he said there hasn't been evidence of wrongdoing, you got two employees who pleaded the Fifth.
Right.
I mean, it's a flat-out falsehood. And we know, by the way, there were multiple instances of senior political officials who were aware. We know right now that Tea Party applications were sent to the chief counsel's
Absolutely.
office. A senior political official, which Jack Lew, apparently following the ostrich strategy,
Right.
plunges his head in the sand and
Knows
says,
nothing
I
about
don't
it.
know.
Right.
But we also have heard reports that the general counsel of the Treasury,
Yep.
who is a political appointee,
Right.
was
aware.
notified of this before the last election.
Correct.
The Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, who was
Right.
another Obama political appointee, knew about it before the last election. Apparently, so did the White House counsel and the White House chief of staff.
Well, Lois Lerner's lawyer is the former law partner of the White House chief counsel. I mean, this is not an accident, and the current chief counsel of the IRS, pro bono, represented Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's pastor.
Well, and the defense of all of this is President Obama didn't know.
Right.
You know,
Plausible deniability. That's
Well,
what
and
they're saying.
I want to ask you a question, Jay.
Yep.
You're one of the most experienced, successful, talented lawyers in the country. Let me ask you, if you were defending a company, if I were the CEO of a company, and my company were accused of negligence, of maintaining a negligent plant where someone was injured or even killed,
Right.
and my general counsel and chief operating officer had been notified of our negligence,
Right.
how effective do you think my defense would be as CEO if I said, I didn't know, they didn't tell me?
Zero. Your culpability is it's apparent authority. You're the president of the company. You're responsible, even if they didn't tell you. The fact that they didn't tell you tells you how incompetent your leadership was.
Well, yeah, and that's of course right. You're on constructive notice.
Right.
Once a senior political official is informed, whether it's the chief counsel of the IRS, the general counsel of the Treasury, the deputy secretary of the Treasury, the White House counsel, or the chief of staff, President Barack Obama is constructively on notice because one of two things happened. Either they told him or they kept him deliberately ignorant because they thought they were somehow protecting him from the scandal. But what we do know is they were notified about it before the last election, and they made the political decision, gosh, we're not going to let anyone know. And it may have just occurred to them that discovering that the IRS was targeting Barack Obama's political opponents before the election might have had some negative electoral consequences.
It sure would have. What do we do with this whole mess? The IRS, the tax code, what's your suggestion?
On one level, this is powerful and disturbing evidence of a culture of corruption that sadly I think suffuses this administration.
Yeah.
A Chicago-style politics that the ends justify the means, and they will use every machinery in government to punish and to go after those who they view as their enemies.
Last question. What do the American people do? They're frustrated, they're concerned, and they're worried. I mean, people are worried, and I know you're hearing this from your constituents, but you're talking to a national audience as well. What did the American people do?
The most important thing, I believe, in the long term, well, two things. In the short term, we need to demand of Congress that they hold the wrongdoers accountable.
Right.
That the House appoint a select committee and it find out the facts, that it not let this dissipate, but get to the bottom of what happened and who is responsible. But in the long term, the best solution is to abolish the IRS. Now, that is not going to happen under traditional Washington rules.
Right.
Because as you know well, there are an army of lobbyists on K
Right.
Street
Oh, absolutely.
who make their living lobbying for tax exemptions and tax loopholes.
Right.
The only way we will abolish the IRS is if we see a grassroots army, millions of Americans come together and say enough is enough, we want a simple flat tax, we want to fill out our taxes on a postcard, and we don't want any government agency like the IRS with the power to ask us what books we're reading and what the content of our prayers are. And so I am working very hard to assemble that grassroots team. On my website, tedcruz.org, we've got a national petition to abolish the IRS, tedcruz.org. I would encourage people, come and sign that petition to speak out. If we can get millions of Americans united, we can drive policy in Washington, but it's got to come from the people.
Reforming the IRS means abolishing the IRS as we know it. I served in the Office of Chief Counsel of the Internal Revenue Service right out of law school. It was my first job as an IRS trial lawyer. But like Michelle Bachmann, I don't believe the agency can self-correct anymore. It's become ideological, and that's dangerous for the American people, and it's dangerous for liberty. I want to encourage you to stand with us and fight with us. Fight on the same side of getting rid of an entity that has targeted Christian organizations and individuals. You know, you're hearing a lot about the Tea Party groups, but the fact of the matter is during the same time frame, many Christian charities were under the microscope of the IRS simultaneously. This was a coordinated effort to stifle the proclamation of the gospel. If you want to see the IRS removed, abolished, eliminated as an entity, then you join with us in this fight by signing this petition at ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. That'll do it for the broadcast this week. We'll see you next week.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme. An out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.